Hello YouTube. So as some of you might know, I just spent some days in nature while I was away from my home gym, and so I had to improvise a new method of training that I called wildman training, where I have to rely on very few pieces of equipment. And they are pretty much contained in the scenery you are watching right now. So I had a log, an axe, I had a pair of Olympic rings, which are invaluable for anyone who doesn't have a home gym. I also actually brought three 10-pound plates that are all rusty and broken down, so I don't really worry about them. I had a piece of wood that you'll see is very interesting because it's an attachment. I had an elastic band that I used for said attachment, and I had a loop, and then once again, these beautiful rings. So let's see what I managed to do with all of that. So when you have limited equipment and you cannot push yourself to failure using weight, you have to use different methods. And in this case, what I did is I supersetted everything. So I'm going to show you two different days that I did in the middle of the forest with no equipment. And that first day started with what was essentially a log press, quite literally because I'm picking up and pressing a log. That is a replacement for an overhead press. It trains the shoulders and it trains the triceps. Now, obviously, that log is not very challenging for me at all, but it's the biggest piece of wood I can put my hands on. And it still actually did the job because it was quite cumbersome. So what I did is I did as many reps as I could, knowing also that afterwards I would superset that with other movements that also tax the shoulders and the triceps, which you usually don't want to do because it damages performance. But in this case, it's what I was looking for. Since I cannot actually go to failure using the weight, I have to find a way to fatigue the muscle in another fashion. Now, is this optimal? No. But when you don't have access to a gym, you have to find other ways around. And it's always good to, discover new things and try and have fun with your training. So that was the fun little overhead press. And then I move on directly from that overhead press to another tricep movement, this time using the piece of wood that I was describing in the introduction so that I can do press downs comfortably, because anyone who has attempted to do press downs without anything to put your hands on, just by grabbing onto the band, knows that it's extremely uncomfortable. So what I do is I just place it in the loop and then I just push down. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, this feels better than any tricep V-bar attachments I've ever used. There's plenty of space for my hands, and on top of that, I don't actually have to grab onto the implement. I can literally just put my palms on it and press downs. So it takes away from the grip aspect. I find that many times when you try to isolate your triceps with those attachments in those commercial gyms, what fails first is actually your grip, because you have to wrap your thumb around the equipment, around the implement. Here, it's not the case at all. So believe it or not, I actually took that piece of wood with me and I actually now have stored it in my home gym and I still use it for push downs. Now, after the push downs, the giant set continues. So I go from exercise to exercise with no rest whatsoever. And this one is going to be a chin up using the Olympic rings. This is personally my favorite way to do chin ups because I find that having the freedom to rotate the wrist makes it extremely comfortable. As you see, because I'm quite tall, I'm 6 feet, I cannot possibly put the rings high enough for me to actually reach without my feet also touching the ground. So I have to tuck my feet in a bit, which naturally places my body in a banana shape. So my chest is almost facing the sky, which makes the chin up much more difficult. In this footage, I'm around 215, so these are big boy chin ups. I think I'm getting like not even 6 or 7. I do them extremely slow and controlled. And since I'm already pre-fatigued from the previous movements, that is pretty much all that I can expect. And I go again straight up to the next movement, which is going to be an isolation for the forearm. Now, chin-ups do train the forearm. They train in particular the brachioradialis. So this is done on purpose because I only have 30 pounds. I can move much more weight on this exercise. So I on purpose fatigue myself so as to be able to reach failure without actually having to use that much weight. So I think I'm going to go for like 10 reps on this. This is a spectacular forearm exercise I recommend anyone try. I call it a pronation twist. It's a form of hammer curl with limited range of motion. And as you can see, the point is that by controlling the range of motion and not allowing the arm to fully supinate, what I do is I allow the arm to then pronate at the top. You see the rotation of the wrist, and that is the point. This massacres your brachioradialis. It is one of the best forearm movements in existence. Of course, I'm going to be doing the both sides. Now, when it comes to forearms, if you want to superset forearms, you have to keep in mind that any movement you do previous to forearm isolation that recruits the grip is going to limit your ability to move weight and therefore to tax the forearm. I did chin-ups before, so my endurance is shot. If you want to be fully fresh and performant on forearm isolation, simply don't do what I do. Again, this is wild man training. I would never do that in a gym. But when you have no equipment and you have to make do with what nature gives you, this is a smart way to reach failure without actually having the ability to, again, stack a ton of weight on the movement. And after this, following the same line of logic, I'm going to go into a bicep movement. So it's 3 movements back to back to back that recruit the arm. This one is going to focus more on the stretch and the peak contraction. It's a form of preacher curl. Once again, I am using that piece of wood. I wrap my entire hand around the piece of wood and I curl in. You see that I also allow the forearms and the wrist to curl inside as well to recruit more inner forearm. This in itself is not that good of an exercise, but as a finisher at the end of a giant set that has already recruited the arm tremendously, this is actually quite intense and it feels extremely good. It is always a nice idea to train the bicep in the lengthened position to avoid injury down the line. Most of the movements I do for biceps, I do in the 90-degree angle, but from time to time, again, for injury prevention's sake, I actually like to give myself more range of motion. And then after that, I go into ab isolation. Usually when I giant set things, my ab exercise tends to just land at the end of the giant set because it's what makes the most sense. And abs really are fairly easy to train even with no weight. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing knee raises using the rings. And as you can see, I rotate the pelvis at the top of the movement. I don't just lift the knees, I also lift up my butt. This is how you recruit the entirety of the core. And then I allow the weight of my big fat ass to stretch the abs so I get the best of both worlds. If you do knee raises in that fashion, you will not be able to do that much. Many people who can do knee raises until the cows come home can because they do them improperly. And now that the giant set is over, I'm going to leave you with a little music montage of the rest of the training. It's the exact same exercises, but in repeat and without me actually commenting. Enjoy. So that was for the first day of Wildman training. So let's see what the second day of Wildman training has in store for us. A type of push-up that is going to develop the long head of the tricep and the entire lateral head of the tricep in particular. So as you see, the way to do them is I place my hands close together. My fingers are pointing forward, so my hands are not rotated inside, so I recruit less chest. This type of push-up is going to make you feel your long head of the tricep like you've never felt before. And times again, what will feel first is going to be that long head. You will never feel via shoulder failure or via chest failure on that variation because you barely feel these muscles working at all. They still work, but much less. So this gives me room afterwards to move on to the second exercise of this Wildman giant set, which is going to be a lateral elevation for the shoulders. That I do them with a loop. The loop allows me to actually rope the weight directly around my wrist and I'll have to wait to actually hold onto it, which I find makes it much easier to feel the shoulder. So I still grasp my fist, I ball my fist up because it's important to still get the grip aspect so as to be able to recruit the muscle more. This is purely a sensation thing, but then I focus entirely on the elevation. And you see also here that I hold onto the ring. Why? Because that way the angle of the arm is modified and the amount of range of motion that is relevant for the shoulder is heightened. I use much less traps in this fashion because the entirety of the range of motion recruits the delt instead because, well, I cannot go higher than this. My shoulder does not allow the range of motion to go higher than this, so it's always relevant. I, of course, do both sides. My shoulders are personally a big weak point. One, because it's not really something that I'm super interested in developing. It's not part of my physique. The berserker physique requires bigger arms. But since my arms have pretty much exploded inside on this bulk, I have to make sure the shoulders catch up. If you look at my back, my upper back is pretty humongous. And the issue is that if you have tiny little puny shoulders attached to pretty big teres major and minor and straps, it looks absolutely ridiculous. So they have to catch up, and elevations are a good way to make sure that they catch up because the only thing that actually works is the shoulders. Now, I could of course go much higher in weight for this exercise, but on that day I decided not to because, well, I'm still technically on vacation and I want to have a good time. I don't want to kill myself. This training, both of these training days that you're watching right now, took me 25 minutes max, pure giant sets, and that way I can then go and enjoy the rest of the vacation. So after the elevation, as I said, I'm going to do more pull-ups, but this time in a regular style, so regular grip. And you'll see that the logic is pretty much the same as with chin-ups. I first and foremost start and begin by engaging my upper back, by actually flexing the arms, and I start by the negative. That way I make sure I never disengage the scapular and then I just go at it. You'll see that, interestingly enough, I am much stronger on this movement than I was on the chin-up for the simple reason, I believe, that the technique that I'm using here has my back be much more vertical, which makes me naturally much stronger because the levers are much more advantageous. Always keep in mind in bodybuilding that you want to find the lever that makes the muscle suffer and work the most. Don't always try and be optimal and be the strongest because that way you most likely will, yes, be able to move more weight, do more reps, but not because the muscle works more, most likely because you are in a position that makes you stronger. After this, I move on directly to another movement that is going to recruit the shoulder and the upper back. So it's redundant, but it's the point, which is a real delt row. Now, the way I do them is a little bit different than most people. I don't open the elbow as much because it tends to aggravate my shoulder. So what I do instead is I focus on bringing the forearm in contact with the bicep. This is how I do my real delt rows. And I only do them here with 20 pounds. Usually in the gym, I think I'm doing them with 45 to 50 pounds. So this is easy weight. But because I'm already pre-fatigued, it's actually quite taxing. So that is also the point. And you see that I don't focus on bringing the arm and the elbow back as much as some people like to do it. I prefer to insist on the actual stretch at the bottom because keep in mind that your rear delt, as you can see here, also stretches to catch the weight, and it's, in my opinion, much more relevant for hypertrophy. And since I've been holding on to things with the rows and the pull-ups, this means that at this point, my grip is actually quite taxed. So I'm going to actually use that to my advantage and train forearms next with an axe. So as I told you, I had an axe laying around, it's entirely blunt. I still actually managed to cut some wood with it, but more interestingly, I was able to train forearms and it felt pretty good. So this is a form of ulnar deviation where it's a form of wrist curl in a sense that greatly taxes the brachioradialis. And on top of that, you can actually modify the resistance curve by moving your hand. So the closer your hand is to the head of the axe, the easier the movement is. And as you can see, I'm not doing many reps. I fell pretty quickly because my forearms are very taxed at this point, which is why if you were to program giant sets in a gym, you would never, ever, ever do it the way I'm doing it right now. Now, of course, the big downside of this axe exercise is that it's almost impossible to progressively overload. So doing reverse curls would always be better. But just for the aesthetics of training forearms with a fucking axe, I think it is pretty cool. Now, after this, to close this giant set, I'm doing more tricep isolation. And you can wonder, well, isn't that maybe a little bit too much? You already did some tricep isolation with push downs the day before. You are right. The reason why I spam them is because I'm nursing a pretty nasty case of elbow tendonitis that was caused by close grip bench. I was a little bit too enthusiastic with my volume, and now my right elbow hurts. What do you do in this situation? You just stop benching, you stop doing presses, and you just wait and you just hope it gets better? No, that's not how you cure tendonitis. Instead, you find a way to send blood and fluids into the tendon and also to train the muscle that was too weak to handle the amount of volume, in this case, triceps. So I do tricep isolation work. That way I don't damage the tendon, I rehabilitate the tendon, and I get the muscle bigger and stronger. And if I can get some extra arm isolation in the mix, why not? I'm obsessed with arms, I want them to be as big as possible. This is what happens when you isolate arms seriously, they look like that. I don't have good genetics for arms. I have 18 inches arms natty. So if you needed extra motivation to train your arms, there it is. And now I'm going to once again leave you with a music montage of the second giant set. Again, the exact same exercises I just outlined, but this time back to back to back so that you can see what the entire giant set without interruptions actually looks like. And to wrap up this video, a bit of a physique update in natural lighting. So I've been bulking for the past 6 months. I'm now 215 at 6 feet. I'm quite happy with the way things have been going because, as you can see, I've gotten much bigger, especially in the arms and the upper back department, but my waist hasn't increased that much. And on top of that, I still have very good abdominal definition. So I'm going to continue doing what I've been doing, focus on performance in the gym, feed the gains via a small surplus, and we'll see where this is going to take me. I have absolutely no plan to end this bulk. I don't give a fuck about cutting. I'm satisfied with the way my body looks, and I want to focus on putting on more mass. So I very well might stay bulking for the next 2 or 3 years. And that's going to be that for this video. So I hope you enjoyed this Wildman training footage. If you would like to support my work and allow me to buy an axe that is not entirely blunt, you can do so by clicking the first link in the description. And as for me, I'm currently working on recording a series of videos documenting my actual training in the gym with every single lift that I do for bodybuilding. So this video is a bit of a beta test to see what you guys like or don't like. Let me know exactly what you enjoyed in this video and what you want to see make a comeback once these actual training footages release. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.